People, we are back. The show is back. We are excited to be back. The weekly show after a couple weeks off. We're back at it, having fun, having a good time. Jimmy, my man, after a long week of travel, we are back at it, having a good time. How are you, my friend?
I'm tired.
You are? Why are you tired, man?
I don't even have a job, Joe, and I'm tired. What's going on there? Oh my goodness, it was weather. What's going on in this country right now? I go south because I'm thinking south is warm. Hell, I might still stay in Iowa.
Right.
It was crazy. So yeah, just a lot of travel, but it's always good, right? It's travel wears on you a little bit, but there's nothing to get you fired up than getting on site somewhere and working with teachers and principals and so forth. So no, honestly, it's good. I'm a little under the weather, as you can tell. So that's a little, but I'm ready to go, buddy. You know why? Because I'm looking at you, and as soon as you start talking, I'm ready. I'm freaking jacked up. And I get to see you this week. I get to hang with you.
It's an exciting
week. That's even better.
I appreciate that. So what the idea that we want to keep in mind is what can we do to help each other out along the way when things get really tough. And so here's the thing that was really interesting to me when I was thinking about what we could talk about today or what it was going to look like or whatever the case may be. And it's some really things happen over the course of the last couple of weeks. So two things. So Nick Saban retired.
Wait a second. Stop. I just saw your sweatshirt. You're such a loser. You are a loser, just God. I hate you. I hate you.
All right. So that was three.
You know what? Nope. Now this is war. You have laid the gauntlet down. I'm going to ask Keela right now to start just throwing crap on your face while you're talking. Like you got to remember, she's got the tech behind the scenes. Be careful, but that sweatshirt is hilarious. Oh
okay.
My God.
All right. Okay, so I couldn't.
You're gonna wear a sweatshirt that says "Quit on kids," and then you're gonna say "Expect average," and then the next one you're
gonna say. Don't carry the banner, just carry a pamphlet. Like, I got it all, man. I got it all.
I love it. I got to get me a sweatshirt like that. Although I'm going to cross out "no," and I'll have to put "hope" back. But gosh darn it, Joe, that's hilarious. God damn it.
All right.
I'm ready to go now. Okay. Now I'm ready to go. But hey, Frank made it. Frank, help me here. I need a comment that's not very nice about Joe. Put it in the comment box. Dang it.
I'm crying. Okay, hold on. So that was at a minute and 40 seconds into the show that you noticed it. Weston and I had a bet that I had the over-under was a minute and it's over. So now I owe him dinner. So it's like I lose, but I win because your reaction, like, come on. Right?
Weston, there's a little bit of a allowance here because honestly, my eyes are swollen shut. I can't see this.
He's not gonna care. He just wants his dinner. That's all. I mean, I'm no dummy. I know how that game works. But so anyway,
that's hilarious. Merchant of Nope. That's gonna be the title of the show today. How the weekly show go? Oh, the Merchant of Nope.
Okay, well, can we talk about stuff? So
yes.
Here's the interesting thing in terms of what I was thinking about this week. So I was saying Nick Saban retires, right? Mm-hmm. And Bill Belichick essentially loses his job. Two of what arguably are the best coaches in their field ever. Like ever. Like there's an argument to me maybe that both of them will be the best ever in their spot, right? I mean, honestly, we could say that. Enough people would say that, where I'm not out of line saying that those two might be the best who have ever done it in their area, right? The thing that was really interesting to me is both of them were replaced within 48 hours.
Yep.
Within 48 hours, both jobs were filled. And so you think about two people who are doing it at literally the highest level that you could ever do it. And even those two were replaced like that. And so you think about everything that they've done up to that point is going to be how people remember them, moving out. And I think it's really interesting to me too, because the whole concept of, people remember different parts about your tenure, but often they remember the beginning when you got there and the rise and if things go well, but they also remember what the end looks like, right?
Mhm.
So, and I think Nick Saban going out in the national semifinal and having probably one of his best coaching years in recent memory. He goes out on one level. Bill Belichick's team didn't do as well. He's got more. He's got what, 6 Super Bowls or something like that. Yet at the same
Yeah.
time, when he walked out, there's a little different narrative as to how he walked out, right? Didn't walk out on his own terms, that kind of thing, right? And
Yeah.
so he's done so much for that organization, but at the same time, the way that they walked out are in 2 different places and people are having different conversations. The point is that, we invest so much into the people that we lead, that we serve, and what goes on with it, that at any point, it's going to be somebody else's turn. And that's okay. That's okay. But at the same time, we're going on. Those guys are going to go on and do something else. They also have families and everything that goes along with it. So what are we doing? Or what are they doing to make sure that their legacy is there? But when they leave, they're still connected to the people that they care about, the people that they love, and think about what's gone on with them over the course of time and how much they've sacrificed over that time. And so, we're all replaceable. And no matter what position, if those guys are replaceable, anybody's replaceable, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to understand that it's not about the job that we have. It's about the impact that we have while we're in the job, that whole difference between the work and the job and the work, right? So
Yeah. Mhm.
go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about when you just said that last sentence, I'm just thinking about all the relationships that those 2 individuals have made over their lifetime, right?
Right.
In their work that they do, right? And that's what they'll take away from it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so interesting. We always say about no matter, Joe, I know you did the same thing. Most leaders I know are very, very invested in their communities. They give everything to the community, sometimes almost to an extent that probably isn't healthy, especially for our families. And, I always said, I worked in 4 buildings my entire career and then name a single one after me after I left. And yet I gave them everything I had. Right. And it's a reminder again that this is why we can't feel guilty as, school leaders or teachers or whatever our role is in schools. Is that we have to remember who's in our inner circle, who's our priority. And it doesn't mean that there won't be other people at times. I mean, it's okay to put our students or our staff or our families sometimes in our inner circle because there will be moments that they need us for whatever reason. They're in crisis. They just need someone that day. But we shouldn't keep them there and replace our own family with these individuals. And again, we talk a lot about self-care and mental health, but there's also this idea of just how are we taking care of ourselves, but more how are we doing it to ourselves? Because I think we're trying to be everything to everybody else and forgetting the most important things. So the other point I was thinking you were talking about too, Joe, that, the fact that they were replaceable in 48 hours, but it's also a little sad. It's a reminder again, right? I don't know about how you feel about this. This isn't a sports show, but I think about this all the time. I know sometimes a lot of our public really begins to. It's funny how we work sometimes, right? This team starts here, and they're really no one knows a lot about them. They're struggling. They're not very successful, and all of a sudden they begin to rise. And over time, some of these, whether it's an individual in sports or whether it's a team in sports, they become to dominate their field. And it's always interesting to me how we love to prop these people up, but once they get there, all we want to do is tear them down.
Unbelievable.
And it's crazy to me, right? And I think about schools that way too. And I think about our teachers and our principals. When I think about our national award winners or our state award winners or our teachers of the month, it's like we want to prop them up, but there's always somebody over there talking
That's
behind
not
their
who they
back,
are.
tear them
Right.
down.
That's right.
And
That's not the real
it's
them.
sad, right? It says a lot about what we do to people in this country all the time.
Yeah.
And I think about Bill Belichick, right? Like, yeah, he didn't end the best, but it's how quickly they forget about, and I don't
Everything
think
else.
everybody does. And I think right now in the moment they may do that, but I think in a little while, they're going to circle back and really appreciate what that guy did. Right. And
I agree.
I'm a little bit different. I like seeing dynasties. So I know, and I don't have any skin in the game when it comes to Alabama, but I like watching them play just because I want to continue. I want to see that dynasty because I know how hard that is, right? When you in a field, whatever your field is, when you aspire for that greatness or that excellence and you get there, it is so hard to stay there, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's we're talking about school, we're talking about student achievement results, or we're talking about your athletic program or your fine arts program, or you got a high performing speech and debate team at your school, it is hard to maintain that. So, but anyway, props to both of them. And but you're absolutely right. It's a reminder again, right? We are just all guests in our
Yep.
schools. That's
Absolutely.
all we are.
So two
Hmm.
things that you said that resonate with me, and I think that one piece that I think is important to get into in specifically in the New England scenario was that the reason that he was replaceable so quickly is they had a plan in place to replace him. There was no question as to who was next, right? Like it was done before that I believe, and I think a lot of people believe that he was done before it wasn't even open. Like it wasn't an
Yeah.
open position kind of thing, right? And I think so if we can think about like what that planning looks like for us or for our teams moving forward to create consistency when we do go, I think our team has a better opportunity to continue the great things that were happening. And I think both of us put ourselves in a situation where we were helping the next group lead to put them in the best possible situation when we weren't there anymore. I think that's what I believe, and I know that's what you did, but that's what I tried to do because I wanted to make sure that we could continue the consistency to what we were doing, and that all the stuff that we were doing wasn't dependent on one person. Because the more that it's dependent on one person, the less likely it is to continue. Now, there are obviously differences in leadership, and some things aren't going to continue because of the the person that's not there. But if the systems are in place to make sure that it does continue, then you give everybody the opportunity moving forward to make sure that the organization can continue to grow. And so I think part of our job as leaders is to make sure that we are planning for the future, a future that's not going to include us, right? Because if we truly believe in service work and we believe in serving groups, then we have to understand that we're not going to be able to serve that group for our entire lives. So that means if we're going to serve, we got to set situations and scenarios and frameworks up to make sure that when we go, that service continues in a way that's working. And that's been, I think that, as we thought about over the course of the last couple of years, how we're bringing people into conversations, how we're setting up processes and systems that are not one person dependent. I think that gives the organization a better chance to move forward. The second thing that I think that you mentioned that really struck me was we give everything that we can to schools, to teams, to organizations. And I don't know if everybody's like that, but I like to believe that they are. I really do. I like to believe that if you are hired to lead a group of people, that you're going to give everything you can to that group of people. And I think that there are ways in doing that to make sure that the people that you love, that you care about, are involved in that while not also being, overwhelmed in that. Sometimes family nights turn into going to games together or whatever. Like those are things that we know are going to happen. But at the same time, if we can do them as a family, as a group of people that are in our inner circle, we give ourselves a better chance for some longevity in it. But it does take over. There's, I know my wife loves me. I know my kids love me. But there are days that I brought home what was going on across school here and didn't intend to, right? Because I was so invested in what was going on there. And honestly, if that was the norm, if that was happening all the time, then I'm going to lose one of those two places. I'm either going to lose that place or I'm going to lose this place. And either way, you don't win. And you talk about that a lot. Like, what are we doing to make sure that it's, we understand that the boundaries are what they are, but at the same time, they often the line gets gray. And we got to figure out ways that we can continue to help each other move forward when it comes down to, leading and still investing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think there's something about people who go into school leadership or district leadership, right? I think part of there is a little bit in our DNA of who we are. We aspire for this. I also think for many of us, we are very ambitious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, at least my experiences, most of these individuals are truly servant leaders, right? Um, and I worry about that sometimes because, we've talked about this before, Joe, is this job can turn you into somebody you never want to become. It's kind of
Right.
crazy, right? It's
Like
like,
this, Jimmy, like that, like that. Like
yeah,
all of a sudden,
yeah,
you're like,
like what
holy
happened?
cow, who
Like,
am I? Yep.
yeah, like how do we lose our way so quickly that I mean, all these people that I talk to, they are family people, right? They
Right.
love their spouses, they love their children, yet we live in this constant conflict about, well, who am I supposed to give my time to? These people need me. This is why I went into this profession. I love what I do, and yet there's always a constant turmoil. So,
Yeah.
how do we give people in our lives permission to help us be who we really want to be, right? The husband you want to be, the wife you want to be, the mother or father you want to be. So, and that's why I think, I have so much grace for our school leaders. And Joe, you and I have talked about that a lot as well. It's like, how do we take care of these people and how do we support them? But, you were talking about this idea that, people are leaving, but that's why this idea of building a community of leaders, I still think building capacity is one of the greatest skill sets that effective leaders have. They have an ability to continue to grow and develop, whether they're growing and develop people's content knowledge or their skill sets, or they're reshaping the mindsets, the way they think of the job, they're influencing their dispositions, all the things they do to set people up for success, right?
Right.
And so that community of leaders, and when you were talking about the service part and the servant, the reason that's so important, in my opinion, is because we're actually modeling. We're starting to create and cultivate a culture that this is how we behave around this organization. This is
Right.
how we do things, right? And that influence is a reminder again that, everybody wants to be great at what they do. They come in not wanting to be that way, but we quickly lose our way sometimes. So
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, because you were kind of talking about it. And I kind of go back and forth, because I'm not this black and white guy. Like, I don't see everything this way or everything this way. I certainly think I think that's why the people business of the work that we do is so important, because part of it is you're knowing your people. So my question to you, Joe, I was just thinking when you were talking, is whether it's Bill Belichick or whether it's and it wasn't in Nick Saban's case, it was in your case, it was in my case. When we are building and growing, developing our own people within the organization to someday maybe replace us, right?
Mhm.
So the work can continue, because we know there's disruptions when there's a new leadership. And
Right.
I think a lot of organizations want to consistently keep um, that, whatever it is we're working on moving forward. But there's also good and bad in that, right? Sometimes it becomes just it's maybe it is time for a change. We see this
Yeah.
sometimes, and again in athletics, like, I love that coach, but oh my God, it's time for a change, right? Oh my
Right.
God, I can't deal with this offense anymore. I can't deal with this
Right.
defense or whatever it is. But it's the same thing in schools. And so my question to you is, when you were superintendent, how did you think about internal candidates versus external candidates, right?
Mhm.
Like, when is it the right time to bring in someone in from the outside, and when is the right time to bring it? Because the downfall to when we have people on the inside, I think one of the hardest things about our job is, how do you tell someone on the inside that you're not getting that job, even
Yeah.
though they're in their minds they may see, but I've been loyal, I've given everything I have, and yet now you're basically telling me I'm not good enough for that job. So what am I doing here, right? So can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit, because that's an emotional toll for all of us as well, right, on both sides.
There's no good way to have that conversation, because no matter what, I think the only way that I think about having the conversation is you have it quickly and you get out of it, because you know that there's going to be time to process and they can talk about it later. But trying to explain yourself in that situation is never the right, for me, not the right thing to do, because it's never going to be heard. There's always that barrier up that says, I didn't get this. So now you can say anything you want, but I'm not going to believe you, because I think I'm better for this position than the person that you chose. So getting out of that, getting in, saying that, the decision was to go in a different direction. If you'd like to talk about it at some point, please let me know. But I just want to let you know, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. And then you're out. Like, I think that's just give them time to process. And that sounds a little bit like abrupt, but it's better than trying to sit there and explain all the reasons why somebody else didn't get it and they didn't, and then having to defend that. In Europe, one person, the committee was larger. It's just not a good scenario to be in. So
Mhm.
that's the first part about it. But the second piece is the building part of it, is trying to give everybody opportunities that might have a desire to be in a role that's not their current role, while also, acknowledging the fact that they're doing really great work in their current role. So if somebody's looking to be the superintendent at some point, giving that person opportunities to sit in meetings, to be part of the board conversations, to be part of the negotiation stuff, to be part of the, anything that works with the community, that kind of stuff, I think is important to, start with that and just involve them for two reasons. The first reason is to see how they react in those situations as being part of that team and kind of get some feedback from them. But the second reason is it's for them too, because what if they don't like it? Right? Like, what if we get to that point where I'm like, I think you'd be a great, person to take this over moving forward, and they haven't been involved in any of that stuff, and then they get into that stuff and they're like, God, I hate this. I just want to go back to the job I used to have. Right? So
Yeah.
if you set them up along the way, you can have the conversations and say, so what'd you think? Is that something that you want to do? Is that, that kind of just kind of bring them along so they don't feel like they're sideswiped when they get into that job too, specifically in the superintendency. Like, you can give them every opportunity. They're still going to feel sideswiped because they're the one sitting in the chair at that point. So if we are giving them opportunities, we kind of close the gap on being sideswiped. You're still going to get it, but at least you can put yourself in a spot that allows them to grow in a way that they can develop some confidence and actually know what's going on. So I think that's an important component. But the other piece, there's no good way to tell somebody internally that you weren't the right fit. Now, when you talk about when's the right time to go outside of the organization, that's a really interesting question, because I think you want to make sure that you continue to maintain the growth that you've developed in that organization. But at the same time, I think you need a set of fresh eyes on some of the work that you do to determine whether or not that work is still going in the right direction. That doesn't always need to be a hire, though. Right? I mean, sometimes that can be like, well, bringing in you. Let's say that you came in just to take a fresh look at what was going on. And I think that might be helpful in terms of where you wanted to go. And then after you're there, you may be like, you know what, you probably want to have somebody here that's not embedded in this since they were, in fourth grade or fifth grade or whatever the case may be. But I think having those conversations with external people starts the conversation as to whether or not you need to bring in somebody that is outside of the organization moving into the organization. And we've done both. We've had somebody come from outside in and stay in, and both, situations have been great in that we put ourselves in a spot to kind of move forward. But at the same time, you just don't know. I think you got to take a look at, in little pieces before you make the big decision to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think there's an emotional toll on us, right?
Yeah.
Because it is hard when you work with someone for so long and they work alongside you, and yet they're not getting positions that they aspire for. So as you were sitting there talking, I was thinking, number one is, I always thought about this, like, what is it we're looking for in a new, whether it's a new teacher or a new assistant principal, a new principal, whatever, superintendent, but it's that idea that I always looked at it as, well, who's going to come in and help us get better, whether
Right.
they're internal or external, who can help us get better? And that's one thing I always try to encourage our leaders to kind of think about, like, well, what are you looking for in terms of who can help you get better? So one of those things is being able to identify your own gaps.
Yeah.
I still think it's relationship in many ways. I think this is why it's important that we invest in people to really understand what their long-term aspirations are. I think that brings clarity to both sides about what their role is and what they aspire for.
Yeah.
I certainly believe that as leaders, when we have people in our organization, and I know I've made this mistake early on that I learned from, but because you build this relationship, it's almost like we want to promise them something, and we really
Right.
can't, because we don't know long term how that's going to end up. So I always tell people, don't make any promises, but our job is to be fair to people. I think it's to be completely transparent. I think it's important to be honest, and I think we do it with integrity. But if I know that Joe Sanfilippo aspires to be a principal, and I'm currently a principal, or I'm currently a superintendent in the district, let's say, and you're an AP and you've told me this is your aspiration, then I do think it's my responsibility to help identify the attributes that are going to help you be the most successful to gain that position. So we have to begin to work together to set you up for success. What are
Right.
the areas that you need to grow in and develop in, and how can you get opportunities to showcase your skill sets and your talents and be able to show people in the organization that you do have the skill sets and you are the right person for the job. And the last thing I would say about this, I do see this as an issue where people do make maybe the biggest mistake, and not everybody would agree with me on this, but if you can see it from the other perspective and if you can see it differently, I do worry sometimes when we just appoint people or we just
Mhm.
quote unquote give them the job because we feel they deserve it or they've earned it or they've been there or whatever. Or maybe we like them and these people become good friends of ours. I've always said that I think it's better off helping these people understand, like, I want to give you this job. I think you deserve this job. I think you've done everything you can to prove it. However, having said that, the danger is if I just give it to you, you'll always be known as the person that we just gave it to you.
Mhm.
I believe in you so much. You've convinced us, you've proven it, you've done all these things. I want you to go into that interview and I want you to show everybody that you're the best person for that job. In other words, kind of make them earn it a little bit. And I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. I just think there's a benefit of that is that if they are the best person for the job, then have them show people that they're best person for the job. And again, they still may not get it because we
Yeah.
know the processes that are involved in there, the politics that are involved in there, all these things that happen. But I know I have tried to be honest with internal candidates, and I know people who have applied and got their feelings hurt, and then actually were resentful of me, held it against me, were upset. But then I also think, well, that proves something about their character too, right? Well, then you're just showing that you weren't the right person for the job, right? And so, but to manage and handle adversity in those moments also says something about one's character. So there's all these different ways of looking at things. But I'd be
Mhm.
curious from our listeners this morning, like, what are their thoughts on some of that? But I do know that's a struggle. I don't know if there's a right way or wrong way. I think there's different ways, but I still think it comes down, Joe, to how well do you know your people,
Yeah.
and what does that look like when those decisions are made? But I do know the emotional toll on that is really, really hard for people.
It's hard, and you're right. The reaction actually probably speaks more about who they are than the process. But here's the thing that would concern me in that scenario, and that's you've brought this person along, you've seen this person as an internal candidate do all the things. If you do what I was just talking about, you involve them in the conversation. You know that they're the best person. You've connected everything to opportunities for them to show the leadership that you hope that that they'll be at when they get the job. All right, so you've done all of that stuff, right, and you've allowed them to do that, and then they go through the process. But then there's this other person that comes from outside that just blows the doors off of the interview committee, but they blow the doors off the interview committee in 55 minutes, and the other person has been there for 4 years doing the
Mhm.
work. So you know what you're getting in that spot. What if the person that was coming in is just tremendous in the interview chair, is
Mhm.
tremendous in talking about how we're going to move people forward, but then doesn't have the capacity to do that when they get there? I think that's the fear for me, is that I
Mhm.
know this person, I know their strengths, I know their weaknesses, I know what's going to happen when we get into situations because I've seen them in these spots. I can walk into any place in America right now and sit down for an hour and talk about all the stuff that I want to do and get people really excited about what that's going to look like. But nobody outside of the people at 336 East Hoover Avenue in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, know whether or not I can do it. So if I'm in that spot, I might look really good coming in there, and then somebody who's may have ruffled some feathers because we asked them to lead or do some things or put some processes in place that hurt feelings. Now all of a sudden they're like in a really difficult situation. So that's the fear for me. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying, because
Right,
I
right. No, yeah,
understand your
yeah, of course.
position, but
Yeah.
that the fear for me is that all of a sudden we go over and let's be really honest. If that person doesn't get the job that they're looking for in that spot, the likelihood of them going somewhere else to get that job is much higher now than it was a while
Mhm.
ago. Now that's not the reason to give them a job, but if we know there's also needs to be a contingency in place for that, because if that person goes, you're going to need to replace that person in a
Yeah.
different capacity.
Yeah.
And if you go and then you replace that person internally, then all of a sudden that turns into a whole conversation too. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just these levels just continue to go. So I think we got to be real careful and cognizant of that, but at the same time, it shouldn't drive it. We just need to be cognizant that it happens.
Yeah, it is very complex, right? And again, I think more reason why we need to be so transparent in the process. It needs to be clear. We need to communicate that. I mean, there shouldn't be any
Mhm.
surprises, I guess, for
Right.
lack of a better word. Again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, but I do think consistency is important as well. But
Right.
then you look at every individual situation differently, and I think you look at it from all angles. But you know, that's why leadership is so hard, because you have to be so the decisions that we're going to have to make do truly take a lot of courage,
Right.
because in the moment that you have to make that decision, you've already thought through every response that's going to come from that, right?
Yeah.
And you know you're going to take hits from it from somewhere, right? And I was just kind of thinking of all the scenarios. I kind of go through my head in scenarios. I kind of try to use those real life experiences, and I can see them, right? I can see people that I remember hiring one of our individuals who's now a superintendent today. Joe, you know him, and he came in as this young guy, and yet there were people in my school that had been there, who had aspired for that role, who had served in a capacity to even fill in those moments. But at that time, our vision of our school needed this, and neither one of those two
Sure.
individuals had that,
Sure.
right? They didn't
Yep.
have that skill set. And it doesn't mean they couldn't have learned it. It doesn't mean they weren't willing to do it, but we had somebody who already had that.
Yeah.
And but I think sitting down with them and being honest and saying, "Hey, this is what we're looking for." That's why kind of when you look at candidate profiles, why I think that's really important. So everybody's really clear what is the skill sets and dispositions that we're looking for, and in terms to help us move our mission or our whatever it is we're working on forward. I think that's important. Um, and then I always say to people too, like even people who reach out today and like, "Hey, I'm thinking about applying for this job. I don't know whether I should or not." And I always say, well, here's one question I always encourage people to think about. How will you respond if you
Yeah.
don't get the job?
Right.
Right? You
That's a
have to be
great question.
in your head, be ready for that.
Right.
And how will you respond? Because if you're going to get your feelings hurt, if you're going to say, well, now they don't value me and I'm going to leave, that's okay. But you need to know that going in, right? You
Right.
can't go in and then be like, now I don't know what to do again.
Yeah.
And so it's tough, and that's probably also what I love about leadership, right? I
Right.
like that as well. So
Yeah. I think got a couple comments in the comment section I think are really important. Rudy was talking about who is the best candidate towards moving the needle for our children, and I don't know if he intended to do this, but putting "our" in caps is really important, because when people feel like it's ours, we treat it differently, right? So if the candidate feels like, or if we feel like it's your or the administration's vision of it, it's different than saying if it's ours. And if everybody believes that it's ours, we look at that candidate a little bit differently, because we know that we're all in it for each other in that spot. I think that's important to consider as you're thinking about what candidates do. And yeah, and he said it was intentional, and it's right. I mean, it's obviously, because he's brilliant, so of course it was intentional. But at the same time, we got to think about how are we leaning into that mentality? Is that our piece of what we do? And I think, and the idea that we want to keep in mind is that exactly what you just said, Jimmy. Like if you have people internally that are even if they're building towards, and there might be multiple people that can move the needle for our children at the same time, one of them's not going to get it. Like if it's one position, it's one position, right? And having them ask the question, what are you going to do if you don't get it? Just having that thought in their head, that's an important component of what they need to know. I don't need to know the answer to that, right?
right,
Like
right.
I
And
want
for
to ask
them,
them the
they have to
question,
know that. That's right.
right? And to be really honest, I don't know if I want them to answer that question to me. In fact, I think it's probably I don't want to say inappropriate, but it's probably not the right path to go down to ask them and say, "Hey, tell me what's going to happen if you don't get this job." I don't think that that's the way to do it. I would voice it in a way that says, "I need you to think about it," and I'm saying this to every internal candidate. Every internal candidate I'm having the same conversation with, and that is, what's the reaction if it doesn't go in the direction that you want it to go?
Right.
So
Right.
just and please don't answer it, but understand that I need you to think. I want you to think about it as I'm asking everybody internally, any internal candidate. I'm asking them the same question to reflect on, not to answer, but just to reflect on. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's funny because I wasn't thinking of it from that perspective, but now that you brought that up, I was thinking more about like when we're giving advice to people who are
yeah.
seeking our advice about whether they should apply for a job. I wasn't even thinking like I'm in the role
Oh,
and someone's coming to me. But that actually,
I
now that you
wouldn't do
say that,
right. I
now
wouldn't
that
do it
you
in the
say
interview. I
that,
certainly wouldn't do it in the interview. This is all
yeah,
pre-conversation as they're thinking about applying for the job. Absolutely not
yeah,
like in the interview process, but as they're thinking about it and they come to you thinking about applying for it, I think you have to have that conversation and just say, hey, if anybody internal, applies for this job, I'm going to ask them the same question. And that is,
yeah.
what are you going to do if you don't get it? Like, what's that going to look like if you don't get it?
Yeah,
And
that consistency where everybody gets the same questions in that sense too. I'm still
correct. Yeah.
not doing a very good job of clarifying myself, Joe. I was thinking like for those, let me say it this way, for those people right now that are current principals, right? What I was saying is if you're a current principal, I wasn't thinking about a current principal saying that to one of their staff members who was thinking about applying for a job. I was talking about like for me or you, right? Someone comes to you and says, Joe, I'm
Yes.
thinking about applying for this job. What do you think? And you say, well, one thing you want to think about it, right?
Right.
That's what I was more from that perspective. But when
I
you
see.
started saying that, I thought, well, maybe that would be something also, right? Because sometimes we'll have three internal candidates. I know my position
Absolutely.
when I applied for my last one, there were three internal candidates.
Yep.
And that's the other thing, right? I got the job they didn't, so that's going to be a little awkward because now all three of these people are going to be my APs,
Yep.
and I'm the principal of a job that they truly aspired for, right? So that is going to bring another. So that's the dynamics of all these things when it comes to the hiring process and what
Right.
that looks like when people are coming into the organization. You have to believe that I don't know how many assistant coaches are on the Alabama team that would have wanted that job. I got to
So
believe Nick Saban, if they've been with him for a while, has groomed these people, and yet the university makes the decision to go outside, right?
mhm.
And that creates other type of internal undercurrents, I guess, in the culture of the organization. Because I got to believe there's some people that are wounded by that. Some people are questioning whether they want to stay there or not, and
Well, it's
other people say, I'm going to give this guy a chance, right? I'm going
yeah.
to wait to see what he says. I'm going to give him a chance and then I'll make my decision. So it's the same thing in schools when we bring people in from the outside, how people on the inside feel about that. And I think that's the reflection we're going to ask people today in the leadership roles they are in currently is that is something that we do have to deal with. It is
Right.
potential undercurrents all over the place. And it's how we manage those with integrity, with transparency. And again, I still say, that is why the better relationship you have with your people, I think the more forgiving they're going to be in those moments, or at least the more
100%.
understanding. So,
100%.
Joe, we're getting near
Yeah.
the end. So I'm going to let you close it, my friend. But before that, I just want to thank the people on here. It was so good to see everybody. Thank you so much for our regulars. And
Yeah.
again, Shane Greenland, Hawaii guy, always here in the morning. I'll
Early.
tell you.
Early. The man was up early. So we started this conversation talking about your replaceable. So that was a really great start. You know what I mean? Like that's it. Yeah. Hey, go do what you can, but somebody's going to be in there before you even know it. And we got into the place where we were talking about how can we make sure that we build people up so they have an opportunity when we do go. And I think that we kind of went all over the place with that. At the same time, two things that we want people to walk away with. One, please understand that the circle that you have, your inner circle, is going to be affected by the position that you have from the people that are not in your inner circle. So when you can keep people comfortable and know that they are loved and seen and valued and heard in your inner circle, it makes everything outside a lot better. You're gonna have to bring them along for some of the stuff. At the same time, they're gonna be, you're gonna bring stuff home to them that you don't want to bring home. That's just what it is. But the more opportunities we give ourselves to make sure that the people in our circle feel like they're seen and heard and valued, the better chance we have for longevity in the situation that we have. And the second thing is make sure that, when we come down to all the relationships that we build up, the thing that we have to understand is all of the interactions that we have with people are going to determine what their response to the next interaction. So if we haven't built trust up with everybody, and then there's a job opening and like the scenario that we were talking about, their response is going to be different than if we've built all of this trust through all of these interactions moving forward. And the more that we see it that way, the more that we see that all of these interactions give us opportunities moving forward, or create opportunities moving forward to get us the best response for when things don't go the way that they wanted to or we wanted to, we put everybody in a much better situation. So we hope everybody has a fantastic week. We hope that you are a merchant of nope.
I was going to go. You said two things. I think there are three things. Go out and be a merchant of nope this week. So.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. We appreciate being here. Have a great day. Take care.
God bless everybody.